"Excuse me. Sir, is there a problem here?" The voice cut through the grand majestic like a blade. Captain Mark Turner stood rigid in his dress uniform. Medals neat, posture exact. "No, Captain, no problem at all," Emily Hardy said, her tone bright and tight. Her fingers rested on Reginald Hardy's sleeve, a small anchor of protection in the crowded lobby. "Invited to the ball. Are you?" "Old man," Turner said, amusement thin. "Aim precise." He let his gaze slide to the faded patch on Reginald's jacket, and the smirk hardened. Reginald Hardy, age 84, did not hurry to answer. He looked without haste at the ceiling, as if listening to a distant thing. His jacket had the soft creases of decades, and the patch was worn to a whisper. "This is the Marine Corps birthday ball," Turner said, voice sharpening. "We need to keep the entrance clear, and I need to see identification." "My grandfather is a guest of General Blackwell," Emily said, words quick, pleading. Turner's eyes flicked, dismissive. A man used to being the last word. "I don't recall that name on the list," Turner said. "For all I know, this is a stunt." He reached for the invitation in Emily's hand and barely glanced at it, his arrogance filling the marble air. "He might be confused," she said, face tightening. "My grandfather served, and he has every right to be here." The junior Marines behind Turner shifted, discomfort sudden in their polished lines. Turner smiled, a practiced blade. Everyone served. "Miss, this event is for a specific caliber of service member, not for anyone wandering in with a story." He tapped the faded patch with a careless finger. "What is that even supposed to be?" he asked, voice low in the held room. The touch was casual. The lobby held its breath. For Reginald, the touch detonated memory. For a heartbeat, he was elsewhere. The hum of rotors, the metallic tang of fuel, the image of a coiled serpent wrapped around a lightning bolt, sharp and new on a Huey door. The flash was sound and smell and muscle, and it passed like a tide. No one in the crowd noticed the impression on Reginald's face. Turner saw only a gray jacket and a frail man. He read confusion for frailty and pressed closer until the old man's calm irritated him. Gunnery Sergeant Alan Harper watched from a pillar, his own posture folded into shadow. He had the look of a man who knows how the world should hold its own. His thumb moved to his pocket, a small motion that carried an old weight. Reginald spoke then, voice quiet but steady, a voice that had given orders long before Turner learned to wear a tie. "My call sign," he said, "Iron Viper." The double doors had not yet opened. The lobby did not yet know the name it had summoned. Harper's thumb tapped a number he had not dialed in years, and the line began to connect. Something older than protocol moved through the lobby, unseen but heavy with history. Alan Harper moved without fanfare. His steps folded into the lobby's hush. He drew his phone and pressed a forgotten number, the sort of number kept in one's head for reasons that do not belong to the present. Colonel Richard Hale answered on the second ring, voice brisk, used to problems wrapped in paperwork. Harper did not waste words. He reported a scene and a name. Reginald Hardy, 84, guest of General Blackwell. There was a pause, a click as Hale's hand found a laptop and a restricted portal. He typed the name and the screen spat out a blacked file with one clear tag. Project Viper, a phrase with teeth. Hale leaned back and his face folded. Project files rarely held a single clear line without the rest hidden. The presence of the tag made the lobby no longer local news. It made it command business. Emily watched Harper's face and felt something thread through the room, an alteration she could not name. Turner still stood near Reginald, color draining from his mouth, his earlier swagger thinned to a brittle edge. Hale called General Arthur Blackwell. His words were quick, the kind meant to travel up a chain, not to be argued with. The general's breathing tightened on the line, a sound that suggested the name had weight. For a few seconds, all the professional polish stripped away from the ballroom's bright faces. Guests bent toward gossip like moths to a small flame, their curiosity now edged with a new seriousness, as the name on a screen shaped their thought. Hale gave orders like a man closing a gate. "Gather the security detail," he said. "Meet me at the service lift in 2 minutes." Reginald listened without flinching, his hands folded on his coat, his expression small and composed. His voice, when it came, was measured. It offered nothing to the men at his rim. It was not a plea. Turner tried to recover his stance. He cleared his throat, then checked his phone as if for reinforcements. The room watched him as a jury watches a witness smelling of falsehood. A young Marine asked quietly, "What is Project Viper?" Hale's reply was a low sound. "I will explain when we are out of the lobby," he said, and his tone carried the meaning that some truths are heavy and must be carried carefully. In the seconds that followed, security moved with disciplined hush, the kind that belongs to men who have practiced urgency so often it becomes a shape. A small cluster of Marines formed near the service lift, boots whispering on marble, and eyes fixed on the old man and the young captain. The lobby felt smaller, as if some history had entered and taken up space. Harper's thumb left the phone, his face set, quietly. The unsaid in the room hung like a question that would not leave until answered by a uniform from above. Emily squeezed Reginald's hand, a small proof of alliance. The service lift doors were minutes away from opening, and a hush prepared for a verdict. The double doors burst open, and General Arthur Blackwell filled the frame, uniform immaculate, medals a quiet reef across his chest. The lobby inhaled and held that single breath. Blackwell moved without spectacle, steps measured like a verdict. He stopped 3 paces from Reginald Hardy and held a salute that sank into the marrow. It was not casual. It was the salute of a soldier greeting a man who had shaped war. General Blackwell's voice cut low, and the name landed. "Mr. Reginald Hardy," he said. "It is an honor, sir." The words emptied the lobby. Phones rose, faces sharpened. Curiosity flipped to reverence. Captain Mark Turner went pale. His earlier swagger drained, and his stance trembled. Blackwell spoke of missions that did not appear in files, of teams that never had lists, and then he said the name that reset everything. Iron Viper. Project Viper found its human axis. The general named the man who had built that shadow, and the jacket meant more than dust. Blackwell gave no citations. He offered no spectacle. He said Reginald had led a team into places the maps pretended not to know, and he was the only man to come home. A ripple moved through the guests, whispers dying like tossed pebbles in a pond. Men who had been indifferent now straightened, and a few lowered their heads in the shape of respect. Turner tried to speak, but his voice failed. His mouth worked and closed, as if shame was a thing he was learning to shape. Blackwell turned his attention to Turner, and his tone changed into the particular cold of command, disappointed. "You wear our colors," he said, "and you used them as a cudgel. Report to my office at 0600. Reginald placed a hand on the general's sleeve, the motion small and steady. "General," he said, "let the boy be." The ferocity left Blackwell like a tide. He did not withdraw his order. He simply let the moment be softened by the old man's restraint. Emily let out a breath that was close to a sob. Relief and pride braided. Reginald's eyes were not triumphant. They were tired and kind. A man who had seen the worst and kept his balance. Security moved with low conversations. Arrangements were made, and the ballroom resumed its planned course. The name Iron Viper lingered among guests like a coin in the hand. Turner stood at the edge, unmoored, his uniform now a poor shield. The story had turned, and the consequences were set in motion. The lobby keeping the memory like a bruise that would color later days. Phones rose now to record, not to gawk. Clips would travel, and some details would need careful handling. Harper exhaled. The call had done its work. Colonel Hale was moving. The lobby a hinge between the public and the secret. Reginald looked at Emily, relief small on his face. The salute would be remembered more than the man, and that was enough. Consequences would follow, measured and exact. General Blackwell did not linger on spectacle. He ordered consequence with the same economy as a battle plan. "Report to my office at 0600, he said. and the words closed like a door. Turner heard them as a verdict. His jaw tightened, the uniform a second skin that now felt ill-fitting. The adjutant moved through the room with a clipped efficiency. Papers slid, names recorded. The language of administration replacing the earlier theater. An official apology was drafted and circulated, not naming Reginald directly, but addressing the wider wrong done to veterans. Reginald was escorted to the head table with a discreetness that suited him, a quiet chair rather than a stage. Guests applauded with the polite restraint of those who feared intrusion, and Emily watched with a small, private smile. Colonel Hale made a brief statement in the corridor, his tone precise. "This office will not tolerate disrespect to those who served," he said. The remark was law dressed as moral correction. Turner was summoned later to a small room where Hale spoke with a low, deliberate cadence. "You will not be dismissed," Hale said, "but you will learn. You will design and teach a new program on the history of special operations and the duties of respect in command." The assignment was a punishment shaped like duty, educational rather than dismissive. Turner left the meeting carrying a new burden that looked suspiciously like responsibility. Harper watched Turner go, his face unreadable. There was no triumph in his eyes, only a steadiness that comes from knowing the system will attempt repair when its edges are frayed. Press and guests debated in low voices, some defensive, some chastened, the story already spreading in clipped, imperfect fragments. Clips of the salute would circulate, captions would simplify, truths would be clipped to fit a second of attention. Reginald refused interviews. He accepted a small badge from Blackwell and allowed himself to be led through the room as an honored guest. But he declined any speech that might turn memory into performance. His restraint taught more than any oration could have done. Later that evening, in the service corridor, Turner passed Reginald and did not look away. He cleared his throat, the sound small in the hush. "Sir," he said, "I am sorry." Reginald studied him for a long beat, and then nodded. "Sit," he said, a gesture that was neither mockery nor absolution. It was an invitation to begin. Turner sat as if learning a new posture. There was no applause, no cameras, only the quiet exchange between a man who had erred and a man who had weathered worse. The moment was a hinge, small but decisive. Emily moved to stand nearby, watchful and steady. The lobby had already altered them all, and the order to report at 0600 would mark the start of a different chapter for Turner. Outside the ballroom doors, a pair of Marines adjusted their collars and watched the late guests leave. Consequences had been handed down, and the repair work had begun. But the deeper question remained unasked. A shape at the edge of the room. Would Turner change? Weeks later, the diner smelled of coffee and old vinyl. Reginald Hardy sat in the corner booth, hands folded, a paper menu untouched, Emily beside him, steady as a weathered post. The place held its normal small talk, unaware of the quiet repair it sheltered. Turner entered like a man moving through a memory. He paused at the door, shoulders tight, uniform swapped for plain clothes, but the posture of a soldier still there. He scanned the room, found the booth, then hesitated as if learning to breathe. He approached their table and stopped. "Sir," he said, "I am sorry." The words were small, the sentence shaped by embarrassment and something like contrition. Emily watched him with a vigilance softened by curiosity. Reginald studied Turner without haste. His face held no triumph, only the lines of a life that had carried more than its share. "Sit," he said, and the invitation was simple, void of sermon or spectacle. Turner sat as though learning a new posture. He placed his hands on the table as if for support, eyes on his own fingers. "My conduct was wrong," he said, voice rough. "I humiliated you. I abused rank." Reginald nodded once, slow. "We were all young once," he said. The remark was not absolution. It was a lesson folded into a sentence. Turner listened as if hearing something taught more than ordered. Emily poured coffee and left a cup by each of them. The clink was everyday and precise, the ordinary sound of a life resuming. Turner accepted the cup with both hands, the motion like a truce. "Tell me about yourself," Reginald said presently. The line surprised Turner by its plainness. He blinked. "You want me to talk?" he said. "Yes," Reginald replied. "Talk about the things that made you who you are," Turner began haltingly, the words falling into the booth like careful footsteps. He spoke of father figures, of training, of impatience that had been mistaken for authority. He admitted fears he had buried under procedure and pride. Each confession lifted a weight in small increments. Reginald listened, and from time to time nodded, a fisherman checking a net. He did not offer platitudes. He offered small, precise prompts, questions that asked the man to look inward rather than explain outward. The old gestures did the work of more thunderous sentences. At one point, Turner stopped, ashamed. "I expect to be punished," he said. Reginald leaned forward a fraction. "Punishment is a way to bend a man," he said. "Education keeps him standing after the bend." The words landed with the softness of counsel and the force of truth. They sat for a long while, the conversation shifting from confession to something like storytelling. Reginald told a short tale of a badge being stitched by a young hand, the moment a name was chosen. Emily smiled, eyes bright, proud without show. When Turner rose to leave, his shoulders carried less of an angle. He said thank you, in a voice steadier than when he entered. Reginald watched him go, and then returned his gaze to the cup. As if measuring time by small acts, the diner returned to its ordinary rhythm. The meeting would not erase every misstep, but it altered the ledger. A captain had learned humility. A veteran had offered space. And the soldiers who had watched that day would see another kind of command, one made by example rather than fear. This story reminds us that respect isn't merely about rank or protocol. It's about recognizing the humanity and history in those who've served before us. Captain Turner's arrogance nearly cost him his career, but Reginald Hardy's grace offered him something far more valuable, a chance to grow. As we navigate our own positions of authority, we might ask ourselves, do we wield power as a cudgel, or do we extend the hand that lifts others? The measure of true leadership lies not in the medals we wear, but in the dignity we afford to every soul we encounter.